Welcome everyone. This is going to be a course that walks you step by step how to do some of the coolest things that I have been posting on YouTube and other places. So as an example, my last video was how to run a 70 billion parameter model across commodity hardware. And I realized that it doesn't do much good unless you can replicate what I have been showing. So that's why I want to actually create a course that shows you everything from beginning to end. And we can think of this first video where we're going to install the infrastructure and platform that I use to do those things. You know, no one has the time to basically do it yourself and bring together all of the, the components that would make something like that possible. Instead, we're going to, and what I always start with is a platform called OpenShift. Now, I run that on my local hardware, but not everyone has access to the same type of hardware. And luckily, it is a hybrid cloud platform that we can install anywhere. And there is a managed service in each of the clouds. So there is a managed service called ROSA, Red Hat OpenShift Service on AWS, that we're going to take advantage of. And just like any exercise routine, we're going to install OpenShift as our warm-up. So this will be a video that begins every tutorial, and we're going to run through the warm-up of getting ROSA installed. Now, to get ROSA installed, you would first go to AWS. And in AWS, you could do a search for ROSA or Red Hat OpenShift Service on AWS, and you would see this just like any other native service in the list of services that Amazon offers. It is a partnership between both Red Hat and Amazon that gives you access to a fully managed OpenShift cluster. It's very easy to get started. So we're going to come in, you can do a search for it, and then you will come to this page. So click Get Started. From there, this is the screen that you will see. Prior to having this green checkbox, initially you would see a screen that looked like this. And you would click Enable ROSA with HCP and ROSA Classic. Once you click that, you'll be taken to an interim screen that has you link both your Red Hat account and your Amazon AWS account. So you don't have to worry that you have existing subscriptions in Red Hat or anything like that. You won't incur any additional costs other than what you're used to with any other native service on Amazon. You can select, once you link your account and you spin up a ROSA cluster, you would just pay as you go like any other service that you're used to running. So I'm going to show you what happens after you link your account, and you just follow the steps. It's pretty easy. If you don't have a Red Hat account, you would sign up for one and then walk through, click that button, click the button that's on that screen to link your account. And ultimately then you would be taken to another screen that looks like this. So I have yet to log in. So I will log in with my credentials, and you will see, to install a ROSA cluster, some prerequisites. So there are 3 prerequisites, and I don't like to do things manually. If you have to do this many times, and that's what we're going to do. So we don't want to necessarily keep our cluster running all the time. We want to be able to, after we're done with our experiments or done with whatever we were doing with the OpenShift cluster, to just destroy it and then be able to bring it back. So that's why this should be a very simple, easy task to accomplish. So to that end, there is a Git repository that I've put out there, and I have forked it from another repository that a friend and I worked on together to make it so that you can set up your OpenShift cluster to be ready to do some, pretty sophisticated artificial intelligence type of applications. But the first step and what I added is a script for setting up the prerequisites. So go ahead and clone this. You would just come in here, say copy, and you will want a Linux operating system. And In this case, you're looking at a Windows subsystem for Linux, and that works just fine. So if you are on Windows or a Mac environment, you would use the terminal, or on Fedora, you would use the terminal directly. But in this case, on a Windows environment, you would install the Windows subsystem for Linux. I will leave that for you to look up. It's not that difficult. Get it installed, and then you would have Git installed as well, and then you'd be able to do a Git clone on this repository. So you would just take this again. So copy that, and you would come over here and then hit enter, and ultimately that would pull down all of the files that are in this repository. So the link for that you can see up here. I will also have it in the description of this video. And once that is cloned, you'll be able to do a Linux command to see the list of files that are in there. And we're going to run this setup ROSA prereqs. And this will even install the AWS CLI and ask you for it'll run AWS configure if you don't yet have your secret key and secret token set up. It will walk you through all of those steps as well. So just go ahead and hit enter on this. If you're asked for your password, the initial password is just because it's asking for the privileges to do some things that it needs those privileges for. So this is just your Windows or your Linux password, your Linux operating system password. So I'll put that in. And this enter your ROSA login token, you can find here. So I won't show you the whole token. I will actually bring this to another screen where I will copy it. But you will see that token in that screen under your console.redhat.com that you're brought to that screen after you click the link from the AWS console. So once I have that token, I can bring up the command line again. So you will see a prompt come up that says copy the token and paste it here. So you paste it, and then it will obfuscate everything. Hit enter. So you'll be logged in, and then you just sit back and watch as the prerequisites take care of themselves. Pretty easy. So you will see a number of prompts go by, and then you will get to a question: are you setting up a ROSA HCP cluster? Now, I will make another video that talks about what the architecture implications for HCP cluster are. That is essentially, so there were two different types of architectures, ROSA Classic and ROSA HCP. And I don't want to spend the time here to talk about the control plane versus the worker nodes. Just a short summary is that you want HCP because it will reduce your costs and reduce the amount of nodes that you have to manage yourself. And you don't manage any of them yourself per se, but the control plane node is taken entirely out of your account, and you don't get charged for it other than a nominal fee. So you do want definitely to select HCP. It's a lighter weight and easier to manage infrastructure and architecture. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. And now we're on step 3, creating the virtual private network. Now in my case, I already had the virtual private network. It exists. So I got an already exists exception. So that's all right. We will go to the next step where we actually install a ROSA cluster. So that's easy as well. You simply say ROSA create cluster, and then we will walk through the steps for creating the cluster itself. It will ask us some questions, but most of the work, pretty simple. We don't have to do anything. The CLI will do everything for us, and the automation that is already in place will handle everything. The first question we are asked is, what do we want the cluster name to be? In my case, I will say AI Workbench. So for short, it's just AIWB. So I'll hit enter. So these optional parameters, I just go ahead and hit enter without adding anything. Deploy cluster with hosted control plane, yes. So create admin user. we will say yes. So create custom password for the cluster admin. I will put in the password that I want to use. Oh, so it will say create custom password. So create custom password for the cluster admin. That's just a yes or no. We'll hit yes. Here's where we will put in the actual password. And then the billing account that we used, that is associated with the ROSA token that we already entered. So it will give you the, a list of accounts. The only account that I have here is this one, so I'm going to hit enter. This is where you're going to be able to select the version of OpenShift that you want to have installed. It's really easy to update your OpenShift cluster, but in my case, I want one of the most recent versions. So I'm going to go ahead and select 4.17.14 and then configure the use of IMD SV2 for EC2 instances. I'm just going to hit enter and just say optional. All right. So external ID optional. Again, on these optionals, I just hit enter. Operator role prefix, that's fine. So AIWB-U6D8. And then, so use the, so OIDC configuration. Now, if you don't have an OID, so basically an OpenID Connect provider, then you would have an option to install one. I've already done that, and you just follow the prompts and it will automatically install an OIDC provider. So that's a login provider or authentication provider. And go ahead and hit enter if you already have one. In my case, I do. So that's what's listed here. And any tags, that's optional. And I get to choose my region. So I'm just going to choose the default US East 1. Private link cluster, I'm going to say no. And then machine CIDR, keep these as default unless you are in an account that has a conflicting CIDR address that's already being occupied in this range. So I'm going to keep the defaults. So pod CIDR. So in the OpenShift cluster, since it's Kubernetes, there's pods, so there's services, and there's this overlay network that has a number of different CIDRs that are used. So that's what you've just entered there. So the pods have a CIDR, the services have one, and then the machines, the nodes themselves also have one. These are all part of the software-defined network that is part of OpenShift. So we're going to go ahead and select. It's very important that you select the basically the subnets that were created in the prereqs, and you have to select two of them. These are the ones. You'll see that you have this ROSA network stack. So that's your giveaway those are the two that you want to select. If you select one or you select this one and the other one, if there's a different VPC that already exists, then that won't work. You'll want to select your ROSA network stack subnets. Go ahead and hit enter. And then you can say enable customer managed key. I'm just going to go ahead and say no. This is where you can select the initial types of worker nodes. So you'll get two worker nodes. You have, again, that control plane that is not running in your account, but that's managing your worker nodes. And your worker nodes is where your actual work will run, the pods that do and make up the applications that you intend to have being, doing the work that you install and create. We are going to, so if you're following the tutorials outside of just this step, and you're trying to do things in AI, we're going to replace these with bare metal nodes that have GPUs. But for now, for day one, let's go ahead and select the default M5.X large and enable auto scaling. I'm going to say no. It's a useful feature, but in our cases, we're going to control that more closely. And it's pretty easy to add new worker nodes and scale things up and down as you need. So compute nodes 2, that's fine for our purposes, because again, we're most likely going to be replacing this for the work that we're doing. It's going to require GPU nodes, and we're going to be replacing those later. So let's keep the initial 2 as that. Any additional compute security group IDs, we can just select. We don't have to go ahead and select anything. That's optional. So again, I'm going to skip it. So host prefix, That's fine. We'll keep the default. So machine pool root disk size, default is fine, 300 gigabytes. Encrypt the etc data, that's up to you. I'm going to say no. And then disable workload monitoring. Go ahead and say yes for my purposes, for our basically our testing purposes. We don't want to take up any more resources than we need to. So use cluster-wide proxy. I'm going to say no. Additional trust bundle, hit enter. Allowed principal ARNs, hit enter. I'm going to say no on this as well. I don't want to pay for stuff that I won't necessarily be using in a production environment. So this is more of a test environment. And enable registries config. I'm going to say no again. All right. So we go ahead and watch as our cluster gets installed. And that will take roughly around 20-25 minutes before we can actually reach the console page. And so we'll want to be sure to actually run a couple of extra steps here in order to actually kick it off. So it'll give you the instruction here. It says run the following commands to continue the cluster creation. So ROSA create operator roles, cluster AIWB. Let's go ahead and do that. So once we run that ROSA create operator roles command, this question will come up. So role creation mode, auto or manual. So I'm going to select auto, and then permission boundary aren't optional. Again, with optional, I'm just going to keep the default and then hit enter. Okay. So once that's complete, then we can check on the status of our installation by running another command. So to determine when your cluster is ready, run ROSA describe cluster-c AIWB. To watch your installation logs, you can also run this command, but I'm just going to run this guy and wait for the response. So it's actually ROSA describe cluster -- cluster or -c equals, and then the name of the cluster, in my case, AIWB. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Okay, we get all of the information, not all of the information, but the information that we need to actually visit our cluster now and start using it. This is the URL that we want. Let's copy that, and I'll bring that up in a browser. So if we were to, I'll bring that up in a browser, and here is where we can use the admin username and password that we decided on when we did the installation. So in this case, the username is going to be cluster admin, and then the password is the password that I entered when I was doing the installation. All right, so we are now in our cluster. We can take a look around. So we're on our main overview page that gives us some just overall health of the cluster. We could go to the observability section, take a look at the dashboards, get some overall, look at the metrics that have been collected by default using Prometheus. But we're going to stop there. We should all be warmed up. So we did our warm-up exercise, which is getting OpenShift installed using the AWS managed version of OpenShift. So it's very easy to get this in place. And now we're going to move on to the next steps. All right. Thank you, everyone.